On this episode of Surviving Outside Sales, we talk to one of the best laser reps in the country, Kent.harshbarger, an executive territory manager with Candela Medical. He's going to run you through all of his processes and what makes him one of the top performers in the country, and he's going to share his advice on what you should do if you want to follow in his footsteps. As always, if you want to subscribe, you can also hit the like button, share a comment, let me know what you think about it. Now, let's get to it. On with the show. Intro.
The Surviving Outside Sales podcast, hosted by Mike O'Kelly, presented by Rithm AI. The goal is to get in, dominate, then get out. Surviving Outside Sales. Now on with the show.
Welcome to the Surviving Outside Sales podcast. My guest today is a fantastic sales rep that I met several years ago, Kent.harshbarger, an executive territory manager for Candela Medical. Kent, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today, Mike. Good to see you. It's been a while.
It has been a while. And thank you so much for joining. To our listeners out there in the Surviving Outside Sales community, I met Kent several years ago when I was making the transition from one industry to another. And the industry I was getting into was the aesthetic industry. And I got some great advice from people saying, when you get into the industry, what you have to do is you have to partner up with the products that go hand in hand or complement the products you're selling. So in this case, it was laser reps. And I reached out to 6 laser reps and one responded, and that was Kent. I said, I'd love to talk to you, grab some coffee, sit down and discuss the industry and maybe share some things so maybe we can partner with. And so I thank you for that, because you were the only one that was willing to meet with me. And frankly, you're the only one that was willing to respond to me very quickly. So thank you for that, because you definitely made my transition to the aesthetic industry a lot better. And since then, he's been at his company for about 5 years. All he has done is get award after award after award. So to say that he is dominating from our tagline at Surviving Outside Sales is an understatement. So Kent, thank you so much. And before you've worked at Candela and you're crushing it, let's go back and kind of give the audience a little background on yourself.
Yeah, so for me, I'm from West Virginia, born and raised. Been married for a little over 3 years, been with my wife, Ashley, for just about 10 years, but we're both from the same hometown. I actually played D2 football my first year at Fairmont State, then actually graduated at West Virginia University, so go Mountaineers. And after that, I actually moved up to Pittsburgh and ended up starting my career working for a division of Xerox, transferred to another sister corps, and then ultimately ended up at Candela. And I'm still here.
Very nice. And we'll touch on Xerox in a little bit, because I just feel, if one of the things we preach about in Surviving Outside Sales is getting a very great training program. And I've heard that the copier companies have excellent training. Was that the case with Xerox?
Yeah, so honestly, when anybody asks me, I personally, when I'm trying to hire people, I want to look for somebody that's got a Xerox type of background selling copiers. Sometimes I'll look at payroll, sometimes insurance, but if I find somebody that's really went through like our division, so there was Xerox and then there was a company called Global Imaging Systems. And they are actually the company that had 46 local dealers all across the country with over 200 offices. And when I first started, all my friends, you talk to them, they're all like, I'm not surprised Kent's in sales. Because I used to be a sales affiliate actually when I was in college, and I used to sell for a company called Cellucor. Nobody knew of them then, but they know them now. And I used to actually have to do YouTube videos, and I would get a promo code. It's funny because you see all these other programs like Roden and Fields, and everybody's a sales affiliate these days. But I used to get made fun of by my friends all the time because I was always posting a message on Facebook with my promo code. And obviously I got compensated and they would get a discount every time they did it. But when I went through and actually started with the company called AMCOM, that was in Pittsburgh, it was the most strenuous sales process, from making cold calls, teleprospecting, having an intro appointment, and then getting to like your final meeting or business assessment, as they would call it. And we did that locally. And then what they did actually for a lot of us, we were about 12 months into it, they sent us to our parent company, Global Imaging Systems in Chicago. And every single day they would take your peers from sister cores and divide you up in groups. Every single time you were always with somebody else. What was really unique about it is you have a list, top 25 accounts that you brought with you. So you would go through that whole sales cycle process, and you would do it in front of your peers. And every single time it was in front of a different group of peers, making phone calls. Usually had 5 that you would call each day, trying to schedule appointments while everybody else was sitting right next to you, listening to those calls. And in addition to that, we actually had our corporate global trainer. She actually was playing the customer role on the very last day, where they communicated to us that we were going to actually be recorded for an intro appointment, and it was going to be sent back to our local trainer for whatever sister core we worked for. So it was pretty intense, and for me, a lot of the stuff came very natural, but when you're in that audience and, you're sitting here and talking and you're sipping the Kool-Aid of managed print services and talking about this big revolutionary assessment methodology, as they like to call it, when I was selling copiers and managed print services and also document management software, it was strenuous. I mean, so you felt like once you got through that and you did really well, which I actually did really well. Some people didn't. I mean, I watched them bomb, crash, fail, but they turned out to actually be really good reps. But I think it sets you up for any future career path that you would take. When I came back, I met with a CFO of a huge assisted living facility. He's like, I don't even know what the hell managed print services is or revolutionary assessment methodology. But he's like, it sounds like I want it. And me and my manager looked at each other and we just started laughing because I was sipping the Kool-Aid from that training, but it also taught me a lot, and that's, for me, I look for that because I know how tough it is to get the door slammed in your face. Gatekeeper doesn't even want to see you. They're not making eye contact. You're getting hung up on the phone all the time because it's a commodity. It's a copier. Whenever the lease is about to come up on contract, can you save us money? Does your company have a good reputation? So I did that for about 6.5 years. I actually transferred from AmCom down to Carolina Office Systems, where I was there for just over 4 years down in Charleston, South Carolina. And I actually had to start a healthcare. They weren't really that involved with GPO contracts. And I didn't realize how much I was going to be taking on, so I had to get on a lot of global calls and kind of learn that whole process and understanding contracts. And during all of that, I was actually interviewing because my dream was always to get into medical device sales. I just didn't know what I wanted to get into. I had so many recruiters. This is the thing that I always find funny now is I had so many recruiters that were either rude to me, wouldn't respond to me, or just be not interested, be professional. But for the most part, the responses I got were astonishing. And then to make it even worse is when I finally said, okay, I need to wait 2 years. I had somebody reach out to me while I was in Charleston, and I actually interviewed with Stryker. Mm-hmm. And you and I were talking, previously, we were just talking about people we've interacted with. I still to this day was trying to look up and see who this guy was, because I'm hoping I cross paths with him one day, because he made me wait. He was sitting across watching TV. I think there's a sporting event going on. He made me wait for over 30 minutes to finally come and sit down in front of me. And the amount of ego that was involved, I laugh at it now because of what I'm doing and how successful I am. And I just wish that we could cross paths again. But, it also told me to take a step back, and be patient and make sure that whatever it is that I really did my research, make sure it was a good fit. Coincidentally, my buddy that I went to West Virginia University with, he was working at Candela at the time. And I was actually interviewing with a competitor. And the recruiter actually told me that this is a one-off for him for the company that he's recruiting for. He actually does most of his recruiting for Candela. And I was like, well, I have a buddy that works at Candela. And he's like, who's your buddy? And I told him, and he immediately was like, I'll call you right back. And calls me, he's, oh my God, just dropping F-bombs, you name it, and was all pumped up because he's like, Tony's my boy, and so it immediately, he's like, we're going to get you into this business, and that to me, I think it helps because I stayed in touch with Tony, and honestly, my VP, who was my RD at the time, they took a risk on me, they trusted Tony they planted the seed to try to convince me to move to Louisville. I wasn't sure that my wife, who we were just still dating at the time, I wasn't sure if she was going to be ready to move from the beach and have her dream job scenario taken away from her to go to Louisville and be around horses and have even worse allergies.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, she was, and she also didn't know, 2 weeks later I was planning on proposing too. So, it kind of worked out. But yeah, it was, if there was one thing I would take away from it, is just making sure that, you're staying in touch with people, because you never know where they'll end up. And it could open up a door for you, which thankfully it did for me. And it's a very tough business, but I think because of my experience in copiers, it really helped propel me and make me more prepared, because, sales 101 and just the amount of touches it takes to get an initial meeting. And then you can have a lot of people lie straight to your face and tell you that they're very interested and waste your time. So I think the mental aspect of it really prepared me for what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really is a big, I would say, what's the word I'm looking for, but really a big reason that I'm so successful right now is going through the copiers.
I agree. And it's interesting that a lot of the successful people that I've found in sales, not all, but a lot, they have a similar background, and it's an athlete. And the reason why athletes, like you were an athlete, I was an athlete, is because we deal with failure. And I think when you push your bodies to their physical limits, I think your mind also gets pushed simultaneously, even though we don't think about it. And so when you're doing the Xerox, you said it's sales 101. I think the people that are the most successful in careers in sales are the ones that go work for those companies that teach the sales 101. And everybody thinks it's about just the training. It's just I was at training for a week and they told me how to talk to somebody. Did they give you the reps? So my first major sales job was enterprise. You want to talk about reps? Oh my gosh. The last store that I was managing, I was probably interacting with 250, 300 people a day. And I wasn't particularly dealing with them, but that's how many people were coming in the branch. But the amount of phone calls, the amount of times I talked to people on the phone, it was the volume over a 4-year period. They talk about getting reps. Malcolm Gladwell famously created the 10,000 hour rule. Well, I got my 10,000 hours. You got your 10,000 hours at Xerox. And so we talk about the surviving outside sales, the 3 phases. Phase 1 is getting in. And if you're getting in, take Kent's advice. Go to a company that does sales 101 and it will teach you, and you're going to get doors slammed on you. That's okay. That you have to go through that in order to become successful later on in sales. You've got to create that tougher exterior, that tougher shell, because sales is not all rainbows and lollipops. Like it is hard. It is extremely hard. It is mentally and physically grueling. And so if you're trying to get in, look for those companies, like you said, payroll, copiers, enterprise, anything where you have to do thousands and thousands of calls and transactions. And, a lot of people,
and they're tracked. Yeah. And they're tracked,
Exactly.
That was the thing with me and copiers. It's funny because they put such a focus on the CRM that initially I didn't really realize why. And it's funny because now in my current job, I'm probably one of the few that are really, really into Salesforce because it's so easy to use. And I see a lot of positives that come from it. I wouldn't say I'm perfect at it, but I used to just always view it on the copier side as being micromanaged, but I didn't realize how much data and reporting you can get by just keeping that information in there, contacts, exporting, a lot of your contacts. If you need to do e-blast, there's a lot of really valuable information, and I hated it. When I sold copiers, we had Wednesday calls, 8 to 12. You had to make 50 calls minimum, and they wanted you to schedule at least 4 net new appointments before we could even leave the office. So it was very tough mentally. You always, would be negative in your own head, a lot of times. But I also think that not just a sales job, I think if you go through something like that, it's going to teach you a lot of adversity. It's going to teach you, how to get through a lot of the mental aspect of daily life, because it is so grueling. And I feel like if you can get through that, you can get through just about anything, on a professional level, at least.
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to deal with salespeople on the business side, so, I think when you've been in their shoes too, I think it prepares you a lot for how to deal with things.
Exactly. And I completely agree with you. When you are used to dealing with failure and you're used to overcoming things, everybody wants to go into something glamorous. Like you mentioned, I'd always wanted to get into the medical sales field. And there are a lot of people that are in their 20s. I've met a lot of people through LinkedIn. I've met a lot of people in this industry, and you kind of ask them like what they're looking for. And yeah, it's great to go to the top of the list. Everybody wants to. I mean, I did it. I played 2 years of minor league baseball. So I really did not enter the real world until I was 25. And I was bartending at a restaurant in the summer. One of my buddies' restaurants, and ran a bar. I was not living in the real world. I was still living in a fantasy world. I kind of joke it's like the mixture of the movie Cocktail and Major League, wrapped into one. And then I got out, and the first thing I did was ask my dad. I was like, maybe I'll get into sales. I really enjoyed solving people's problems. And so it was interesting. When I was bartending, I was crushing people in total sales. So my manager was like, how are you doing this? Everybody else has same shift, same hours. How are you doing this? And I said, it's simple. People are coming in for a reason. I am fulfilling a need. They're coming in because they want to relax, have a good time, meet up with friends. And so all I'm doing is facilitating that. And so all I'm doing is putting myself in their shoes. When I go, this is what I'm looking for. So that's all I do.
Right.
I don't wait until they're, like, for instance, I wouldn't wait till somebody was done with a drink until I offered them another one. I'd always try to upsell them. I'd ask them about their day. Oh, you sound like you had a rough day. We have tequila shots on special. Do you want a tequila shot? And I guarantee that almost all said yes, because I offered. Now, I didn't ask them if you want to do a tequila shot after their 6th drink. Not that I overserve people, but I didn't wait till then. I did it at the beginning. I understood you kind of want to do that at the beginning, like a beer and a shot. And so my sales volume was through the roof, because I was trying to help them. And so I see sales as solving people's problems, filling a void. And so this was 2003. So LinkedIn's not around. All these other technology things are not around. We had the Charlotte Observer, the Charlotte Observer want ads. And the job postings. That's all we had. And so I had my dad reach out to some headhunters. And the first question they said was, does your son have sales experience? And my dad's like, no, got to get sales experience. Okay, where do you get sales experience? And what did he say? Go do copiers, enterprise, payroll, door-to-door. Do that for 2 years, and then pharmaceuticals will look at you. Medical sales will look at you. And so back then, it was just, that was the only way. The medical industry does not have the requisite training to go through the 10,000 hours to deal with a lot of the issues. And so I think that might be an issue with the turnover. Why the turnover is so high in the industry. It's because any type of adversity that they run into, maybe they're looking, the grass is always greener, because there's so much opportunity out there. So
and a lot of times they don't always realize how lucky they are to be in the position they're in too. And that's, I find, I'm on my 3rd junior rep, and I would say I made a couple of mistakes in hiring. Honestly, I should have probably let them learn the hard way. And that was probably a lesson learned on my part, so I'm valuing my time more. So I'm trying not to waste as much time with all of that, unless I know they're fully committed. That makes a big difference. And it's just amazing to me how many people, even the ones that do have some sales experience, when you bring them into these roles, they really don't still realize how lucky they are to be in this position at such a younger age. Because I would have killed to be in their position.
Exactly. And so I think that's also, you're getting your reps and getting your practice, but you're also failing at a tremendous level. And I think that failure it creates success later. So that can be another reason, like you're saying, that maybe the junior reps you're hiring don't have that. And so the first hint of any kind of adversity, or things feel like they're not going what they thought it was going to go, maybe there's a lack of persistence and push through that I feel like I've had my entire career, because it was forced upon me. It was, if you want this job, you have to learn how to push through. And I know, hearing your stories, that's how Xerox, the representation of Xerox companies that you worked for, that's how they operate. You either push through and find out how to push through, or you're gone. And so it was a put up or shut up. And so,
Right.
if you're trying to get into sales, the best thing to do is go to one of those companies, because it will teach you how to do that. And then, like you said, if you're a hiring manager, look for people that have that background. Focus on people that have that background. If you've got two candidates, one person that's had background in one of those B2B companies and another candidate that has light experience in the industry, my recommendation, go with the person that's got the Xerox payroll enterprise B2B, because they are going to push through and be a much better employee. They're going to take coaching better, and they're going to wrap their arms around that opportunity. So I have to brag on Kent, because he's not a very braggadocious guy. When I first started in the industry, not only did I meet up with him, but I kept hearing how awesome he was from all of my accounts. I'd walk in and see Candela machines everywhere. And I said, "Oh, you got a Candela machine?" They're like, "Oh man, we just love Kent. He's the best rep," all that stuff. And so once I started to meet him and get to know him, I absolutely agree. Just awesome guy. If you have an opportunity to connect with Kent, I thoroughly believe that you should. At the end of the episode, we'll have in the show notes, we'll have all the handles, and we'll have them underneath the video as well on YouTube. So reach out to Kent and definitely, see if he has any advice for you, because wealth of knowledge. But so let's talk about Candela. It's one of the best laser companies out there, quality products.
Yeah.
How have you been able to keep such a high level of success and consistency? Because every time I turn around, you've got new hardware for winning awards. So
Yeah.
walk us through how you approached taking over the territory, because your territory is quite large, and how you've been able to take a very large territory, hit the numbers you have, but consistently do it year after year after year. Walk us through your process.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny story. So when I first started with the company, John Santos, he's my VP of sales, and he was my RD at the time. And I remember I was kind of hitting the panic button, because that first full week, we were kind of getting through all the HR stuff, and then I was like, well, what about business cards? I don't have business cards. And clinical training was another like 2 weeks, because that following week was actually the week that I was traveling back to Charleston, South Carolina. My wife and I were going to Universal, because that's where I was proposing at Epcot. And then after that, I was coming back and going straight to clinical training in Boston. And I was like, so what am I supposed to do the rest of the week? And he's like, cold call. And I was like, I don't have business cards. He's like, well, I'll give you the template, go to FedEx, get some temp cards printed. He goes, you know how to talk to people, right? Because that immediately I was like, I don't know the technology. I mean, I can bullet point a couple of things that I've just read from brochures, but I was like, I don't know anything yet. Like, do you think it's a smart idea? It's like, well, you know how to talk to people, right? You know how to cold call. And I was like, that's a good point. And that's actually it's one of the things I first say to people, because even in our junior rep position, like they're always like so overwhelmed and thinking they've got to know everything right away. And you don't. Like, it's okay. Like when you first start with the company, to tell people you don't know, but I'll get you that answer. And a lot of times people try to BS their way through it. And I'm just not one of those people. John, he would put a very big emphasis on the team environment and leaning on your peers, and told me to just be a sponge. And he uses me as a reference a lot, because I did just that. I looked and I interacted with a lot of people on my team that was really successful, and I molded into my own. I made sure that I took bits and pieces away from everything or everybody and what I liked about them, but then I made it completely into my own. And then I didn't try to do too much. I used reference calls. I built my own network of people to start utilizing, and jumped on calls. I mean, when I didn't have an answer, I got them on the phone with a peer and let them connect with them, let them answer all the questions that were a little bit more difficult for me. And I think being honest, that to me, I think is probably the biggest thing. Is I'm very, very blunt. Sometimes I think most people, if they're in front of them, like they're worried about hurting somebody's feelings or upsetting somebody. Where with me, like they know they're going to get a very honest answer, good, bad, ugly. They're going to get the truth. And I think in our industry, there's a long running joke, best way to get rid of a laser rep is to buy from them. So you hear a lot of my competitors specifically, they're always saying, oh, post-sales support, but then they don't follow through on it. Like, I'm never going to overpromise anything. I'm big on under promising and then over deliver on that department. And that's something I think, once I usually make people a customer, like they're loyal, most of them. This industry, sometimes it can be different because they are always evolving and coming out with new technology and saying it's always the latest and greatest. I think the one thing that people realize that there's got to be a reason that I've been with the same company for 5 years, not just staying in this industry where reps tend to jump around every 1 to 2 years, but just the fact that I'm still with the same company, even if we're not launching products as much, it tells you how passionate I am about the technology. I really believe in it. And I think when I'm in front of accounts, they can see that too. And then the other thing to me that I do as part of my pre-sale, and I actually heard about this, it's funny because Dave Pataka, he's my regional director now, one of the best managers I've ever worked for. He is exactly like me, like customer first, the rest will sort itself out. Believes in good karma, has your back as a salesperson, like he wants you to be happy, but he also he 110% supports you with making sure that customer support, that is first. And that to me is the biggest piece, because when I'm going through any sales purchase, I put myself in the customer's shoes, because I've had horrible experiences when I've purchased things. Hell, I'm still dealing with it right now. I finished my basement, paid $73,000 to finish that basement, and I'm still dealing with the general contractor from almost 2 years ago and getting that final inspection. It's been a massive headache. And I'm like, all the money I spent, and I'm thinking about how expensive these devices are. What kind of customer support would I want? Sometimes I'm told that I get a little too emotionally involved. I don't see it as a bad thing, because I'm following through on everything I said I was going to do. And I also think about the lost revenue, and how frustrated a patient might be. Because I know how I would be if I was a patient, I paid for a treatment. And all of a sudden the system's going down for maybe a second time, so that's where I'm able to differentiate myself, and I really think one of the takeaways that I got when I first heard about Dave Pataka was I heard that there was a rep in South Florida. I heard this from my teammate that actually started getting referral letters, and it was part of his pre-sale. And I think he uses it even post-sale too, just to kind of remind people, I actually started doing the same thing. I started waiting a few months when I first started getting a few sales and a few new partnerships with a few of my doctors or med spas that I was working with. I started asking them for recommendation letters. I usually would wait until they needed something post-sale just so they could see that I did everything that I said I was going to do. I'm not a rep that I'm not going to type up a letter and have them sign it. I've had a couple of accounts that have actually said, hey, if you write it, I'll sign it. And I refuse. If you're not willing to, take a couple of minutes, to write what your experience has been like, then I don't need your recommendation letter. And that to me is part of my sales process. I actually have my sales book underneath my laptop right now that goes in my laptop bag every time I go into an initial meeting, because I really like when I start getting in the conversation of post-sale support and all the things that I focus heavily on. And because sometimes it's a price conversation and I have to remind them of the value of the time that I spend away from my wife. So my time is just as valuable. So I have to remind them of why, and showing them recommendation letters and seeing what other people think about me, I think says a lot. I think that breaks down the wall a lot of times, because sometimes I think I can be a little too serious, because I have to set that expectation at the initial meeting. But, I think people immediately get comfortable when they see what their peers say about me. So I think when people can have those references to refer back to, I think that's equally as important, and I think that's a big part of my success. That's why I enjoy doing it. I think having a broad portfolio that I believe in, where, it's not just one product that people can come to me for. I think having a lot of other gaps that I can help them fill for their patient needs, I think is another big piece of it. And it can be overwhelming. I mean, I went through a lot of change just even the first year. So trying to go from 2 body products to 13 devices in our portfolio, it was a lot to learn. And I kind of went from where I started at the beginning of March 2016, going to January 2017, our national sales meeting. I had to learn all these new products again. I started hearing all these wavelengths. I remember Chris P, he actually is in New York. I was telling him this story when our mid-year sales meeting last, I think it was the week before last. he was actually doing a presentation on our V-beam, and he was talking about poikiloderma sabbat. And I remember keying onto that word, or those two words, and I was like, I'm never going to be able to say that. Like, I was so overwhelmed by those type of details, in addition to hearing all these like 755 nanometer, 1064 nanometer wavelengths. Is like, oh my God, it's like, how am I ever going to learn this? I remember texting my wife, and it was 2-hour sessions, the entire national sales meeting of just trying to learn products, because we just restructured our divisions. I was so overwhelmed, and I just went back to how I started with the company: use my resources. Like, we had teammates that were willing to get on calls that had been here a while. We had peers that were willing to get on calls, and then also telling people, hey, I don't know. Let me get an answer for you. I will get back to you either same day or next day. I'm following through on that. And it's okay to tell somebody you don't know. And that's something I have that conversation daily with my junior reps. Is sometimes they worry about trying to know too much right away. And I tell them to leverage their resources, because it is overwhelming, and you want to do well. You're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. There's also external pressures personally that you probably are adding to that, to where you feel like you got to know everything at once, and you don't. So that's probably the biggest thing that I really did really well, is making sure that I didn't try to overwhelm myself and use my resources.
Surviving Outside Sales podcast is brought to you by Rithm AI. If you are in outside sales, check out rhythmai.com. That's RITHMAI.com. The sales enablement tool that will help outside sales teams build their best sales days every day. Rithm, prospecting, targeting, and routing simplified. Everything an outside sales team needs, nothing it doesn't. Try for $1 for the first month today. That's rhythmai.com. Now back to the show.
I was taking a lot of notes because I think this is such good stuff. And I actually learned a couple things. You can sell anybody, anything, anytime, one time. The old phrase is, oh, he's so good or she's so good. They sold a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. Yeah, well, you know what they didn't do? Sell that woman again anything, because they lost all credibility.
Yeah.
And so you can have a sale, but one sale does not a career in sales make. Unless you sold something that you made like a couple $1 million and you retired or you reinvested it. But for most people, making one sale now with lasers, you're making, 5-figure commissions on sales, but you had to build up to that. Most people lower level, you sold one Xerox, what'd you make?
I remember I was happy with the $1,000 commission at one point, and then I sold a pretty big order not long before I left the company that I actually should have made more than I did, but I think it was about 17,000. It was a deal. It took me 2 years of just like assessments, going to like 10, 11 locations. Yeah. I did all the work. It was very cumbersome, hours on the road. And it's just funny because now, I don't get out of bed for that dollar amount.
Exactly. But the key thing is, you mentioned, and I've said this before, and it's one of the things that I was trained on: under promising and over delivering. If you focus on that as a salesperson, that is a great foundation. From two people, Kent just mentioned it, and that's the thing that I've done as well. If you underpromise and you overdeliver, you're never going to catch yourself holding the bag. You're never going to look like a hypocrite, and that reputation is going to follow you, that person knows how to deliver. And, I learned something from you. I never have done a pre-sale before, like a pre-sale strategy, and you do. And that's fantastic. That is, I'm going to start using that. And I've done recommendation letters in the past, but I have succumbed because they say, well, I'm too busy, you write it. And now when you're telling this story, I just realized how I failed in that, because it's not genuine. If I write it, if somebody reaches out to them and says,
credibility.
Oh, hey, I see, I got this letter from Mike. And then they're like, oh, yeah. If they didn't write it, they don't know what was in it. And so I'm definitely going to change that in my formula. So I love it.
And as it goes back to like the honesty piece of it. And like, to me, like maybe to my own detriment, I just can't, I feel like I'm misleading. If I present that to somebody and they actually didn't write it and I wrote it, I feel like that right there would play out in the back of my head. And that's probably the one quality of myself that I've just always been that way.
Mhm.
Sometimes maybe too honest to a fault, because sometimes people don't appreciate my honesty, especially if you ask my family members, because I can be pretty blunt.
Yeah.
But, I think it's really, really important, to be able to do that and have that as a reference. The other thing I do on the pre-sales, just since you brought that up, is we went through a pretty extensive, and I was taught to do a lot of this stuff on questions I knew to like ask, like even some copiers, but we had a really cool disc profile training when I was actually early on into starting with Candela, and it was very focused on the psychology aspect of the different, like 4 different types of personalities that you dealt with. And in doing so, you just start to create certain lists of questions that you just know to ask. And that's part of your like pre-planning, for any upcoming calls you have or sales meetings you have. And it's just amazing because it really works. And you can deal with a lot of egos. So you can deal with people that want to please, that are people pleasers, kind of figuring out who your audience is and being prepared. It forces you to do a lot of things, but it all starts becoming pretty second nature for me. I can go to a website now and identify the type of person I'm dealing with.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Is there a book you recommend that talks about this, or any kind of resource, or is this just provided to you by your company?
So there was a third-party consultant that came in, and if you look it up, you can actually find the disc profile just by Google searching it. You should be able to find it pretty easily. Warren Odette is actually the consultant, and I actually really enjoyed him because I got thrusted into like the advanced selling component, like in a group setting where we actually had to pick an account and talk through all the different levels of contacts that we're dealing with, because they always say to be 3 deep and 3 wide.
Okay.
Well, when I was selling copiers, I was very focused on basically like major accounts for healthcare. So I already had that kind of strategy anyways, because I was calling on CEOs, CF, materials management, purchasing, a lot of different levels of contacts. But now I saw like there's actually a more important role of the influencer with all these different level of contacts. And so we actually just had to go through that and talk about all the different contacts we had, where we were in the process, and got a lot of feedback. And then the following day, we actually went to kind of sales 101, and we developed a list of questions based on the different personalities that we were dealing with. And then you start learning, like, once you see it actually work, then you start coming up with other questions that are good questions to ask this type of person. And I would say you get it from used car salesmen. They do all the talking. There's a lot of people in my industry, they're big talkers. I'm really not. I will control a room when needed. And I fit on I was at very high. I was the only person that when they had us do the survey that actually fit, I was very high on the spectrum. It was like a combination of D and I. I'm very dominant when I need to be, but I can listen. And I'm really good on asking just a few really good questions. And we'll spend 45 minutes in a room. And I've said maybe 5 sentences because they just start talking. People want to talk. That's why they're there. They want to, especially depending on your audience, they want to talk about their successes. They want to talk about their business because that's their baby. And they also want to talk about how they got there and what they failed at, because they want to teach you. And I like to learn. I like to learn from a lot of people. And, it also tells me a lot about who they are and how they make business decisions. So it helps guide me. And I try not to give too much of my secrets away, because I'm probably going to share this podcast. I'm sure some of my customers will hear it, but that's okay. They know I'm genuine,
Yeah.
But I enjoy like having good conversations with them and learning a lot about their business. And what's just crazy is the amount of information you can learn from just a few key questions, knowing who your audience is going to be in that room. And that's something I really talk to my junior reps about, is just being prepared. Even going into a cold call, like if you don't know like several different points of contact, it will make me go crazy if you can't tell me who a mid-level provider is, how long they've been there, who the practice manager is. Even if it's not on the website, you can go to Facebook, you can go to Instagram, you can go to LinkedIn. There's so many different avenues to be able to find information. That just tells me that if you're not taking the time to plan your route and do that research ahead of time, or even the 5 minutes before you go in somewhere, then we're wasting each other's time, because it makes a big difference. Because hey, you're going straight to ask for the doctor, you're probably not going to get the doctor's time right away. But how about I ask for the nurse who maybe has a break in between seeing patients, and ask quality questions about their business, not just about lasers or whatever it is you're trying to sell somebody or want them to invest in. But that's the last thing you should be asking about.
Exactly. And so let me interject real quick. My pre-sale is a little bit different than yours. So I love hearing how you do yours, but I still do the same thing. I search out their social media. And one of the things that always kills me is when I ask people, I said, well, who's your competition? They'll always list people within their category. And so when I start a job, I'm like, all right, who's our competition? Like, how does this whole process work? When I started in the aesthetic industry, my competition was dollars. My competition.
You're competing for dollars. Yeah.
I'm competing for dollars. So everybody was my competition. Now you weren't, because our products were used after your service.
Yes.
They were, but all those skincare reps, I wasn't selling skincare. I was selling post-procedure products. But guess what? The money that they were going to spend, or they budgeted towards purchasing a product to sell in their clinic, it was either going to go to skincare or it was going to go to me. It's also them not making a decision and never buying anything. And so a lot of times when people think of competition, it's like, oh, there's another laser rep. No, it's everybody that walks in that door. You're competing for their time. You're competing for their dollars. You're competing for shelf space. You're competing for a lot of different things. And so what I would do is scanning social media. And I believe it's never been easier to learn more about your prospects. Then it gets easier every single day because of websites. You can go onto the website and you can look at the doctor's bio, or you can look at the office manager's bio, whoever your target's bio is, and see if there's any commonalities.
Yeah.
So
maybe they went to the same school as one of your existing customers, or LinkedIn connection. Like there's a lot of different windows that you can connect the dots. Yeah,
exactly. And also, if you walk in an office, one of the biggest things I would do, and I don't know if you do this as well, but this is how I was trained. As I walk in, the people at the front desk, they get mistreated more times than not than anybody else in that office. And so if you're just nice and you ask them about their day, it goes a long way. What it does is brings their guard down. It doesn't mean you're going to get in, but you can find out a lot of information. One of the questions that I like, and I want to see what your thought is, you walk up, and if you can't get in, you ask the person who's at the front desk, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? And every time I ask that, they kind of look back like, oh, well, I tell you what, let me give you the cell phone number of the office manager. What I would do is call, leave a message, and let them know that you got the number from me. And it's amazing how all of a sudden now an answer and an avenue presented itself that wasn't before.
Yeah, so it's funny because you know why that is because when you're thinking about humans and the interaction, like people do want to help naturally, like they want to help other people. And that was something that I was actually going to bring up. Like, I'm probably going to take that away because I've used that in the past numerous times when I was new, or even just like newer in a territory. I was always playing up like the new card. You know? And it's funny because I would have gatekeepers though, that when I would come up and talk to them, they wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I remember one specifically in Eastern Kentucky. Like I was laughing about this the other day because she did not even look up at all in our direction. I told her I was new. I was hoping she could help me. And I told her what I was trying to accomplish, and immediately stops what she's doing. I mean, she's gone for like 15 minutes. I see her walking back and forth, trying to track somebody down. And I was like, oh my God, and she's somebody that like probably doesn't get up out of that chair very often. And it was just that side of it of her just wanting to help. It just completely changed her mindset. But like, I like what you said too, is that's something too, where I, even on a call, like, let's say if I didn't have that conversation with the gatekeeper, or maybe she's new because she just replaced Sally or whoever that I used to talk to, I might have that conversation on the phone too. Look, hey, I've tried this, and this, what do you think about this option? Like, I'll actually bounce an idea off of them because then they feel even more valuable, and if they like you,
asking their opinion. Exactly. Everybody.
And if they like you, they want to help. Yeah, if they like you, they'll want to help. any way that they can. They might be careful on how much information they give you, because they're like, hey, I don't want to get in trouble, kind of thing, because maybe they can't give out everything, but they do want to help. I think that's something that people tend to forget about, the human element, that people still do want to help people, even though a lot of things go on in the news and it seems like there's a lot of hate in the world, but there's still a lot of really good people here. And I think if you can not be a jerk when you're coming in the door and they actually like you, I think that's important.
Kind of a takeaway is being prepared, under promising, over deliver, focusing on a system to pre-sell, utilizing your resources. And one thing you didn't talk about, but I know from our previous conversations, you're super consistent. You don't gun it for a week and then let off the gas. It is just consistent performance year over year. And that is one of the things that burns a lot of people out of direct sales, is it's pressing at the end of a quarter, and then pressing at the end of the next quarter, and then pressing at the end. And all of a sudden, year over year over year, it just completely stresses you out.
I was going to say the other thing, to do with that and just like being consistent is I live and die by my calendar. Everything's like color coded. If it's a cold call prospect, they're like, it's highlighted in green. If it's an appointment, it's highlighted in blue. And my calendar is planned out, for weeks. And having that routine, and even with the prospecting, it's just funny because when I have conversations with my junior reps, I'm like, how do you keep track of this? They're like, well, I go in Salesforce and there's a task waiting on me. Well, do you always just open that and you check like in between every single prospecting, like say, hey, what's next? Like, no, you don't. But if you can get a 15-minute alert ahead of time, or the next alert because, hey, you just missed this, but in your calendar from your phone, that's how I manage and keep track. Sometimes it's the devil in the details of trying to keep track of everything. The only way I can do it is if it's on my calendar already, or else I'm not committed to it. I think that's how I'm able to stay consistent, or else anytime like doing like this, we had to plan out for it and make sure we had schedule. I prepared to block off more time because I figured we would talk beforehand. I figured this would probably go longer than we planned.
Yeah.
Is it hard for me? I have two screens right now. Like, I want to keep looking at this, but I try to make sure this. It's funny because I was listening to podcasts earlier. Is actually, I don't know if you've ever heard the Pat McAfee podcast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Pat and I used to party together in college at West Virginia. So I know him well. But he actually just had Phil Mickelson on there, and he was talking about Tom Brady. One of the things that he took away from him is like when he goes into whatever it is he's doing, and this is actually something like I just reminded myself that I need to make sure that I'm constantly doing more of, is being present in whatever it is that I'm doing. Like, don't think about anything else other than what it is that I'm doing at that time, whether that's personally and professionally, because my mind goes 100 miles an hour. I'm an adult ADHD. So I can be thinking about 15 other things and thinking about the next thing, like while I'm doing something right then. And I need to make sure that I wrangle myself in and do a better job of that. I think I do a good job despite all the distractions, but if I could tell anybody, just make sure that they stay present, make sure that they're focused on whatever it is that they're doing at that time versus thinking about everything else that's going on or what's coming up next.
Mm-hmm. No, it's very important. I do the same thing, and it's focusing on what you have as opposed to thinking about the next deal and the next deal and the next deal.
And I think also when you're beating your head against the wall, like sometimes it takes that, like, because I think it also lets people know that you have a sense of humor. That's what I like about social media now is, I get a lot of people that first time they see me, they already know who I am because my Instagram, because they follow me, but they also see my face has been on Buddy the Elf. So like being able to break down that barrier so they see that you can be corny and cheesy. Mm-hmm. They let you know that you're probably somebody they like to be around. Yeah. So they're more open to actually having a conversation with you before completely shutting it down.
Absolutely. It is prepare how others won't and do what others are not willing to do.
Right. Exactly.
A lot of salespeople, I know you have too, where it's just, if your company's not paying for something, they won't do it. And I said, right. Okay, well, if I get into an account that might give me a 5-figure commission check, and the only way to get in there was to be nice to somebody, or if it was a $10 gift card, would you do it? And every salesperson would say, yes, great. I'm willing to buy that on my own. I'm willing to invest. Right. And I'm doing it and not trying to get anything out of it.
Right.
Access. And if it doesn't work, I don't care. I did something nice for somebody. And if it didn't lead to anything, I'm not thinking, oh, I just wasted $10. No, you didn't. Now, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't go out and spend $1,000 on gift cards and just throw gift cards everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's targeted, but
Unless you want your wife to kill you.
exactly. Yes. She's going to say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I think you're investing a little bit too much, but
yeah.
I really do appreciate the time. There's one more big topic I want to talk about: social media and how you've used social media to create a lead generation where a lot of people, and especially in the medical industry, they're not doing it right. Talk about where you've had success, and then what avenues, how you're using that, and where you think it's going.
Yeah, so it's funny because when I was first realigned, when we restructured our divisions, I actually started reporting to my buddy, the one I went to college with, and he got promoted, and we were on the same region. It was the Mid-Atlantic region, and we were actually at our sales meeting that we had. We were in Virginia, and I remember, I think I had started like an Instagram account, and like I created a Facebook, which is funny because I had just gotten rid of my personal right before I started with the company, because I was like, I'm so tired of seeing all the negativity on news feeds and everything else. Well, the reason I started a Facebook page was because I would start going to websites and products and services wouldn't be listed on there, or new team members wouldn't be listed on there. And I was actually also one of the first ones that actually like got LinkedIn. So I've had LinkedIn since I think 2010 or 2012. And I actually was granted early access to Sales Navigator. I still pay like $49.95 a month or something, because they just honored that fee and it never increased on me at all. And I continue to pay it. And so I was pretty early adopter to that. And I still wasn't using that to its full capabilities. I'm getting better at that. But the Instagram and Facebook piece actually came because I started realizing that accounts were updating when they would have new products and they would get new employees. I could also find other email addresses that weren't readily available or easy to find. It might have been a personal email address, or maybe more generic, or at least it's getting filtered and going to somewhere else. So I started doing it that way and started eventually becoming a little bit more active. I would repost some things. I didn't even know how to repost when I was nominated to be our Mid-Atlantic like marketing, like social media guy, because they started hearing how Florida was doing it at the time. They had a whole team, the whole team had access to it, and they would repost things, and we're already starting to dabble in it. Well, I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, like I want to be better than them, because I heard that they were doing a whole presentation on social media and marketing. I said, I want to be better than that. And initially I didn't realize how much was involved. I really didn't know the structure, like how to get followers the right way. I didn't even know how to use the repost app, because I started seeing people that were reposting. I had to ask the guy that was the junior rep on our team, even though he was about the same age as me. So I saw you reposted that. Like, what is that? Like, how do you do that? He showed me the app. Like, download this. Here's what you do. And I'll be honest with you. Like, I also just thought I would follow as many people as humanly possible. Like whoever had 1,000+ followers and more, I would just start liking their comments or liking their posts. And I thought that was the quickest way to actually get a reaction. I had to do a lot of pivoting and shifting, and I just like kind of look back on it because I laugh and I'm like, man, if I knew what I knew now, like, because I'm still in the process on Instagram. I capped down at how many people I was following at 7,500. Now I'm down to, I think it's like 4,000, like 4,200 and some change, but I'm still dwindling through that list because there's a lot of people like, how did I ever even end up following this person? But as I was doing that, we actually had a practice marketing partner that we started using. And I heard a lot of feedback from one of my customers about how great this like particular campaign was that we had for one of our devices. I thought we were doing it internally. I didn't realize we were outsourcing it with a consumable order. They were getting like 90-day of geo-targeted ads through some company. I found that out like kind of the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And I started thinking about this and like, man, this is a lot of freaking work. Like what else can I do? And I said, all right, I'm willing to invest on myself, because I'm thinking not just like expanding the Candela brand, my brand, like Kent. Because at the end of the day, and my RD is awesome about this too, like he likes to remind people internally, like it's not just Candela. Like people aren't just coming and buying because it's Candela technology. There are 15 other companies in the market now. It's way more competitive than it's ever been, but they're buying from Kent.
They're buying,
Yeah, exactly. And everything that I promised them. And that's also something that I'm just finding, the impact that it's had. Like I started outsourcing to a company called Aesthetics Integrity Group to help me with some of the creative content, like some of it, like once they realized that it was fair game, I started this in December. They're the ones that put my head on to Buddy the Elf, and when they realized I didn't care, they started encompassing things, but they're also holding my feet to the fire because I know where my strengths are. Like, I'm not afraid to be in front of the camera. It took some refinement because one thing about me too is maybe to my own detriment, I'm judgmental, and I'm a work in progress, but I'm hypercritical of myself. So being on social media and shooting videos, like I critique every little thing that I do. And so there was a lot of pausing and realizing that, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
But showing a different side of myself and also being funny with putting my face on a lot of these other images, it's gotten people's attention. So I started outsourcing that, to get some additional help for Instagram and figuring out how to connect, Instagram to Facebook. I couldn't even figure that out. Like that was a whole nother issue. She kind of came in and did it in 2 minutes. And so I started coming up with the schedule that I have these Thursday 3 segments. And since then, evolved that into I built out my own website because another problem we were having, no fault to my inside sales team, but they're so focused on consumables now and not as much capital that sometimes things can get lost in transition. And what I didn't want to have happen is me do all the work creating this content and then still always going to that website and then maybe it just going into the abyss. So I wanted those leads that I directly had an impact on to come to me. So we built out a website. Now we started this YouTube channel, and I also have started developing a constant contact. We have an email campaign that goes out every 2 weeks with a new video, or maybe a more specific topic, because all these videos I created, like there's a lot of them that we're going back and like, hey, well, let's use this one, because we haven't used it yet, to start getting more brand awareness. That's part of the campaign. And then of course, everything that I create, I also post on LinkedIn, and I'm noticing a difference. I mean, I've been in a room a couple months ago with an account that I've never met in person. She immediately, the owner actually goes, when they go to introduce me, they're like, Kent? And I said, yeah. And she's like, Harshbarger? She had that look where she's trying to figure it out and she wasn't sure where she knew me from. She goes, it's from social media. Like immediately, never met her in person, but she remembers following me on all my posts. And I actually had to call the marketing company because I was like, you guys are going to love this, because that tells me, that I'm finally at that point where I created a brand. But to take it a step further, the esthetician that was in the room, when I reacted like, oh my God, do you know me from that? That's how you remember my name and who I am. That esthetician was like, everybody knows who you are because a lot of people follow you. And I was shocked to hear that. It allowed me to realize how impactful, like building your own brand through social media, even though I hate it at times. It's good and bad. It's a lot of work, and I think for the people that are willing to commit to it, I mean, I'm getting a lot of questions internally from our chief commercial officer. Like they want me to do a presentation now. And I think as much as I equip people with all the information of things that I'm doing, because now I've also learned a lot along the way on how to create images and creative content and adding text into videos and doing a lot of things that, it's time consuming. And what I realized that this is probably where I differ from a lot of sales reps is I will help you. I will give you as much information as possible. Even though I'm super competitive, I also know that I'm one of the few people that are willing to actually put in the work to actually do all this stuff. So yeah, I'll provide you with all the information you want, but I'm still going to end up being at the top and being one of the top reps because I'm willing to actually do all this stuff that I'm talking about doing. So Instagram, like you and I talked about before, TikTok, we'll see if I get on board with that, but the YouTube channel, website, Instagram, it's all really important, and I've also started, I outsource the lead gen campaign through LinkedIn now. So I have a new dashboard, that I go in and access and get replies and automated campaigns. I helped actually tweak a lot of the messaging based around who my target audience was, and I've also made a lot new contacts. So it's also generated a lot of new email addresses. I outsourced another email campaign to get new contacts, like through that same lead gen consulting group.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm looking for every available scenario or resource to get an edge. And I would say for me, I would say that's probably my biggest thing is I'm always looking for that. I listen to podcasts all the time. I'm always trying to be better, and I'm adapting. And I think where a lot of people, some of the old dogs, even in this industry, they're not willing to. They want to keep doing it their own way. But eventually they'll probably get swallowed up and spit out. And unfortunately, you have to adapt and get involved in social media.
The most dangerous sentence in the English language is, we've always done it this way. So
God, it makes me crazy. Yeah.
And so a lot of things you said, 100% agree with you. Kent.harshbarger is a brand. And yeah, if you left Candela today, your business does not dry up.
Right.
Now, if you go to a new industry, you're going to have to recreate that. But if you went and sold something else in the aesthetic world, they would just follow you. That is what people mean by a brand. Now, there is a company brand where people are loyal to the brand of the company, but it's also, they trust you. Because of all the things we've talked about in this episode so far, you underpromise, overdeliver. You're very blunt and honest with them. You don't lie to them. You're not just trying to sell them. So they don't feel like you are a salesperson. They feel like you're a business partner. And so you've also figured out it comes down to the consistency and just doing it. And you're definitely obviously ahead. And I think we're going to wrap up there. It's been an unbelievable conversation. So people can connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm going to put your handles are going to be on the video, and I'm going to put in the show notes as well. Your LinkedIn, your YouTube channel. You also mentioned your own website. So tell everybody what that website is.
Yeah. So it's Kent.harshbarger.com. It's simple, easy to remember.
Yes. And we'll put the correct spelling so you get there, and we'll put a link in the notes. So Kent, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Go follow Kent on LinkedIn, YouTube, and go to his website. If you're in the medical industry and you want to know more about his technology, you've got to give him a call as well. Let everybody know where your territory exactly is, because you do have a large territory.
Yeah, so I cover North Carolina, all of North Carolina. I cover all of West Virginia, and I cover all of Kentucky. Mm-hmm. So I kind of re-inherited Kentucky, right before COVID. So
if you're in North Carolina, if you're an aesthetic office and you're in North Carolina, you're in Kentucky, you are in West Virginia, you've got to give him a call. And if you like this show, subscribe to the Surviving Outside Sales podcast as well. We'd love to have you, and give us any comments on how we can make the show better. Thank you so much, Kent. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Take care.